Good evening, and thank you for joining me here tonight. I'm really excited for tonight's show. When I reached out to my editor about tonight's stream, he'd actually recommended me to react with you guys to a video that was released. I'm looking right here about 5 days ago, but it's apparently kind of exploded in popularity. I'm not sure if you guys may have seen it or not. When I actually told him that I haven't seen it yet, he actually didn't believe me. And so we'll be watching it right here together. So before I go ahead and start the video, if you do go ahead and like this content, like the stream, if you want to watch my previous videos and like the content, be sure to subscribe if you're on YouTube and follow me on Rumble, X, however you are watching here tonight. Do look forward to watching this and reading all your comments as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into, I believe it is Why Do Young Women Hate Men? So, like I said, with that, let's get right into it.
You conducted the exclusive polling for this piece, and there are some really fascinating results.
Might be a little loud there. Hold on, guys. Let me go here. Let me turn it down on my end a little bit. It's a little loud for me.
One of the starkest findings was how negatively young women feel towards men compared with the other way around. Can you unpack some of the stats for us, please?
Yeah, I think out of everything we found, this was what jumped out the most to me. I think we're very used to hearing about young men's negative views of young women's and sort of, misogyny amongst young men. But this really struck me because we found that, 72% of young men have a favourable view of young women, 7%, so not very many really, have an unfavourable view of young women. When it comes to women under 30, though, only 50% have a favourable view. The unfavourable view of men goes up to 21%. And then under 25...
Wait a minute. Did they say that, what is it, 80 or 70% of men have favorable views towards young women, 7% of young men don't? Was that 15% of young women don't have, or only 15% of women have favorable?
To views of young women's and sort of misogyny amongst young men, but this really struck me because we found that 72% of young men have a favourable view of young women, 7%, so not very many really, have an unfavourable view of young women. When it comes to women under 30, though, only 50% have a favourable view. The unfavourable view of men goes up to 21%, and then
I'm going to assume that that's 50, not 15. Could be the accent.
Under 25 women, it's just 35% of young women.
Oh, and under 25, it's 35?
View. The unfavourable view of men goes up to 21%. And then under 25 women, it's just 35% of young women who have a favourable view of men. And if you go into very favourable, we actually use positive rather than favourable. But if you say very positive, it's just 11% of under 25 women. So we are looking at an environment where young women feel a lot more negatively towards young men than the other way around.
It's really interesting because I think if you sort of, as a casual...
Those numbers don't really surprise me all that much, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think the media tries to portray men, especially young men, especially young, white, maybe even Christian men, as this kind of like incel type figure or profile, you could say, when it comes to how they view women or trying to, be kind of closet misogynist, which is really kind of grasping at straws. 72% of young men hold favorable views of young women, and only 7% don't. They view young women negatively. But for women under 35, it was 50. But for women under 25, it was 35 had a favorable view of men. This is just classic old school propaganda, and it's been pushed by all kind of the waves of feminism, trying to kind of create the gender equality and all that kind of stuff, and the education system, all that kind of stuff. It's nothing that none of us have. It's nothing that any of us haven't heard before. So I'm kind of interested to see where they might go with this.
casual observer of some of the discourse about sort of gender politics and particularly the manosphere, you'd assume that this sort of rift between young women and young men was driven by young men's opinions and behaviour towards women. Perhaps it is. We'll get more into the reasons behind some of these figures. But really, I mean, it's much more stark on the side of women's attitudes.
Exactly, and it's not even reciprocated, you know.
Well, young women are taught to view men, especially young men, as adversarial, especially if the push for college and for higher learning, and kind of, all that kind of stuff, pushing for degrees and advances in the career, the C-suite, all that kind of stuff. They don't really view men as counterparts or as potential partners or equals. They view them as competitors. They view young women view young men the same way that young men view other young men in careers, which bleed into their everyday life, which is competition. So no, I'm not very surprised that when you manipulate or you brainwash young women into these careers, into the corporate world, into colleges, universities, you're pushing them to view young men who they are, supposed to societally be looking to potentially marry as the enemy, as competitors. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Because young men don't view young women like that. We're not supposed to. It's not natural for us to view the young women as threats, career-wise. This is not in our DNA. So.
On the young men's side, it really is unbalanced, with young women feeling much more negatively than young men.
Yeah, and Emily, you spent a lot of time with this demographic of young women for your feature. How was this negativity towards men shaping their lives? How did it come out when you were speaking to them?
I was really, really surprised by how negatively they spoke about men. And I mean, some of them still had boyfriends and still were dating, although some of them were even quite negative about the men they were dating. One girl I spoke to was like, I can't imagine my boyfriend at the pub with his friends talking about political issues, whereas that's basically all me and my friends talk about. So, she felt quite scathing towards, even though she loved him.
What? You can't imagine your boyfriend hanging out with his friends talking about politics when you as women don't typically talk about politics with themselves. It's not really something that naturally comes up in conversation. That's crazy to me.
She felt quite scathing towards him, and some women I spoke to had basically sworn off men completely and said they were uninterested in them, didn't have male friends. They all said they would not date a man who didn't share their basic views, and given women and men don't have exactly the same politics, and that's going to become more tricky if women are just totally not up for dating a man who disagrees with them on core issues. They viewed that as an absolutely uncompromising moral standpoint.
Yeah, I thought that was.
But here's the thing, that's good. Okay, so people nowadays have made relationships, dating, all that kind of courtship, marriage. They made it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. Ben Shapiro kind of talked about this a little bit in the past, of course. You don't need to agree with everything with your spouse in order to be with them. There are core pillars of your foundational view of the world and how you wish to proceed with a family that you need to actually agree on. Whether or not you guys like vanilla or chocolate ice cream is not one of them. Whether someone likes vans more than sedans isn't one of those things. Your hobbies don't matter. What matters is how you're going to raise kids, what kind of religion are we going to have, what kind of family structure, home structure do we want to kind of have going forward? What kind of roles are we going to establish? What are the parenting styles? How many kids? All these types of things. That's what matters. What doesn't matter is what kind of movies do you like? What's your hobby? No, that doesn't matter. So, young women having these uncompromising principles in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's just that they're the wrong principles.
really interesting because it becomes really pronounced when it gets down to particular political and social issues. So 6 in 10 say they would find it difficult to date someone who disagreed with them on the Palestine-Israel conflict or who didn't share their views on Donald Trump. And Emily, did you get a sense of why? I mean, you spoke to some influencers actually, and we often talk about these influencers in the manosphere who are leading boys astray. But in a way, there's something sort of reflecting what's going on the male side of things going on for women. Had they been sort of influenced by things that they were seeing online?
Yes, I think men and women are looking at very, very different internets now, young men and young women. Like the women I spoke to said they were worried about what the men were looking at online. They're worried about, Andrew Tates and people like that.
Yeah.
Whereas I spoke to an influencer who would post very, very left-wing content, very sort of anti-imperialist, very pro-Palestine, very anti the government, anti-Starmer, anti-Trump, but also there is mixed in content about, and with her and people like her, about toxic masculinity, about manufactured male victimhood, things like that. It all kind of blurs into a larger online space where that has a significant antipathy towards men alongside progressive politics.
Yeah, I found it interesting actually. That's something that I've come across on my own feed, lots of as a mum of a first child, like she's a toddler, I've got a lot of parenting content coming through on Instagram Reels in particular, and it's a lot of women basically being so horrible about their husbands and the fathers of their children.
Totally.
Weaponized incompetence and all of these kind of buzz phrases. And I come off it, and I don't recognise that in my own partner or many people that I know, but I do get a sense that there is a lot of frustration and hatred for the opposite sex out there.
100%. The girls I spoke to.
No, yeah, that's 100%. When what she said about the content for parenting made by women being very negative or antagonistic of their husbands, that's something that's been very kind of trendy for a while. I don't really see it going the other way around, though, of course. There's just a lot of women who have a lot of time on their hands.
I didn't put this in the piece, but they all watch this content about brides being humiliated at their weddings by their husbands. That's a real genre of content. I think a lot of these skits they're scripted, but they'd all watch this stuff, and that was a specific thing for them. That's just, men can be so horrible, you can't trust them.
Oh, almost like to drive their rage, kind of.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, just as you see these skits drive to enrage men, there is the same version for women as well.
Yeah. And what is making women feel...
You're going to have types of content that are going to try and appeal to the different sexes. It's not very surprising.
So disaffected, Scarlett, who you've studied in this polling. I mean, you find that they're very, very pessimistic about their own economic outlook.
Yeah. They're hugely pessimistic about their own economic outlook. They don't think the economy is working for them, which I think is partly then why they have a more favourable view of communism than capitalism, why they think the economy is stacked against them in a way that the young men feel less strongly. And what I find about that is I think it's really interesting because I think it's very clear to me that the economic outlook, they don't think the economy...
version for women as well.
Yeah. And what is making women feel so disaffected, Scarlett, who you've studied in this polling? I mean, you find that they're very, very pessimistic about their own economic outlook.
Yeah. They're hugely pessimistic about their own economic outlook. They don't think the economy is working for them, which I think is partly then why they have a more favourable view of communism than capitalism, why they think the economy is stacked against them in a way that the young men feel less strongly. And what I find about that is I think it's really interesting because I think it's very clear to me that the economy is not working for young people generally. If you look at the youth unemployment rate, if you look at student loans, it's very hard to make your way as a young person, I think, at the moment in this country. But I think what's interesting is that young women feel so much more pessimistically about it than young men, even though actually they're all in a bad situation, but women are in a better position than men overall. So, female youth employment stats are much better than male ones. Again, female earnings now for these younger generations have surpassed male earnings. So actually, yes, I think it's sort of absolutely right that they're feeling frustrated, but I still can't quite explain how much more pessimistically they feel, and that is even more pronounced actually amongst, like, it's a bit of an awful pollster term, but about ABC1 women,
Okay.
rather than C2DE. So sort of middle class, more affluent young women in this country are the ones that feel those negative feelings towards the economy, towards how that system works, and much more pessimistic about their life chances than those from more working class backgrounds and in more working class professions.
That's really interesting.
That's a great insight from her there. And of course, she is the one who performed the survey. What she said about, so this is obviously you can tell from the accent, this is a UK, centered video, or kind of the context is that this is for the UK, but this is the same issue as in the United States. This is why we voted for Trump. Gen Z wanted to go ahead and have the mass deportations to get rid of the illegals who are influencing the housing market. We wanted to lower spending and have tax cuts so that we could have less inflation and the cost of affordability crisis kind of be resolved. And none of that happened, of course. And so, the concerns for young people regarding affordability are very real, and obviously this manifests in this study. It's a real problem, and whichever party openly says it first is going to get the majority of the disaffected young people. A lot of them voted for Donald Trump in 24. Obviously, Donald Trump has chosen to have the boomers defend their housing values over giving the next generation that first footstep in life, the runway into actual adulthood. And so in that way, it's kind of a little bit of a betrayal. I know that's a really hot button in the Trump world. But hearing that young women who are objectively doing better than young men have a more pessimistic views on the economy than young men is and isn't surprising. And as they kind of she mentioned there is kind of a little bit of an aspect of pre-existing economic conditions, and so that kind of mirrors a kind of champagne socials, which is those who may have a little bit more privilege are more likely to be overly corrective in terms of their difficulties, whereas maybe those who aren't as privileged are kind of more content for where they are. So could be a little bit of that. But it also could be that young men are kind of hardwired to kind of deal with the struggle at a certain point, at least career-wise or financially, where young women most likely aren't, which is why they typically try to secure a mate pretty early on.
Interesting. And did you find that those more middle class professional women had a more negative view of men than the?
Yeah, and they had a more negative view basically across the board as well.
Right.
So they were more likely to think the country is racist, for example, more likely to think that the country is sexist, more likely to feel pessimistic about their own chances, more likely to feel pessimistic about how the economy works. Basically anything you can mention, that they were more negative.
And Emily, did you get any insight at all into why that might be? Because obviously, when you mentioned some of the issues that generation are facing there, Scarlett, housing shortages, high student debt, and men are in that position too. So why is it that women are coming out with a different outlook?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think a big part is the internet. Your polling showed that women who are more online feel a lot of this stuff more strongly, are more worried about things like abortion rights and the environment. I think they would put it, if you ask them, their main answer is women are more empathetic than men. We naturally experience misogyny from a young age. We experience sexual violence, or we witness sexual violence. We experience a lot of them had what could be almost reactionary way of talking about we experience physical pain, and that in our bodies creates this greater sense of feeling and empathy compared to men. It's a very sort of biologically essentialist way in a way of talking about one's politics.
Yeah, I thought it was quite interesting hearing these young women who are...
What are you talking about? What? So, young women are feeling, or younger middle class women are feeling more negatively towards the economy because they're more empathetic? and because they are more likely to experience misogyny at a young age and to see sexual violence and experience sexual violence? What? What are you talking about? The empathy part I can definitely see in terms of them themselves maybe in an okay position, but because others aren't, they almost like take the negativity on behalf of them. They kind of internalize it in that way. So I could kind of see it that far, but the the latter half of what she said was absolutely ridiculous.
Extremely progressive in their values and their mindset. Also saying things that you kind of expect from an older,
Totally.
maybe less online generation, like, oh, they're just different,
Yeah, they really
boys will
root
be
it in
boys.
their biology.
Oh yeah, the internet. By the way, the internet radicalization, 100%.
Yeah.
And they would say, yeah, we've experienced that, and therefore, I've experienced misogyny, and therefore I can now empathize with people who experience racism, if they're white, for example, or, classism, and we can just start caring about things. Men never started feeling oppression, so they've never had to care. And I think, that there's obviously a point in that. There obviously, I think a lot of young women growing up will have experienced a friend who suffered sexual violence, if not them. There are those kind of things that can make you aware. But I think also then they go on the internet and it completely reinforces those beliefs and tells them that you should be concerned, and it's a very, very moral issue to not be, and it's a problem if you're not concerned, and you shouldn't be relaxed, and their friends feel that way, and it's a sort of vicious cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of that in terms of because one of your friends, especially with women, if one of your friends feels a certain way, then you almost feel obligated or pushed, either subconsciously or consciously, to agree with them. It's happened a lot with the whole like trans stuff. One friend would become transgender, and then it'd be almost kind of like a societal contagion. And so in that way, it kind of spreads. And so if one girl is upset about the economy, talks to her friends, and then kind of like a domino effect, I guess. Interesting.
an interesting interview that you do with someone who was on one of those student pro-Palestinian encampments during protests, and they were struck. This woman who you spoke to, sorry, I can't remember her name in the piece. She was struck by how something had happened, some terrible thing had happened in Gaza, and the women there were crying, whereas the men were like, oh, let's just talk about logistics of our next action.
Yeah.
And that for her summed up that men couldn't sort of feel what was going on as empathetically as women.
Yeah, that was Ash.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna let her talk first.
She was really frustrated with men she worked with in campaigning for Palestine, which was basically her whole life. Like she said that she spent way more time on that than her studies. And she found it very difficult that the men would drop in ways to give speeches and sort of take the limelight, but then they didn't feel as deeply, and she viewed that as a sort of just a failure of empathy. Basically, they couldn't quite stretch themselves. It was still about ego, even when, and actually the girls I spoke to at Leeds University as well said that they felt that when men were involved in like social justice issues, it would be by far the most when they're sort of running for politics, like running for the university's Green Society or something. They'd be more likely to do that than they would be to do a protest on another issue. They'd never touch feminist society. They wouldn't touch social justice issues that don't involve self-promotion. That's their feeling.
And they felt that extended.
That is that is so good. That's fantastic. So the women kind of notice that the men aren't very emotional when it comes to certain political topics, and they decide the men to approach it more logically and rationally and logistically. Whereas the women are like, why don't you see the emotional part of this? Why aren't you empathizing with the victims? If that experience, that anecdote doesn't just clearly demonstrate how differently men and women approach politics, I don't know what does. My editor said that I should kind of maybe approach to do another kind of the case for videos, and I'm really starting to think I would consider doing women's suffrage because, or feminism or something like that. I made women's suffrage to kind of expand on feminism more broadly because I think this topic is actually really important. Yeah, men and women are engineered biologically, not socially, but biologically, to approach these issues differently. And when she said that, men don't typically focus or give priority to these issues unless they're running for something, unless they can use it for their own political gain. Yeah, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. No, you know what kind of men care about social issues, social justice issues? Not a single one. And if they do, it's only to get around the women who do care. Sorry to break that to you if that's the first time you're hearing about that, because it's true.
Ended into their personal relationships as well, didn't they? They felt that a man would call out misogyny if they fancied the woman who they were defending, but if not, they weren't really sort of saying things to their friends that, you know, you shouldn't say that.
There's
If a guy says, if I'm with my guy friends, then they might kind of call someone on being mean to someone who might be attractive, and might be a little bit more less strict if it's not. Sorry, I guess, but it's true. There is such a thing as pretty privilege among men.
very, very frustrated with the young men in their personal lives. They feel like they will make racist jokes and sexist jokes, and they'll laugh at them. They won't stand up unless there's a very specific sexual goal.
Well, Scarlett, you talked about the sort of contrast in terms of class, but actually there's quite interesting stuff coming out of your research about the differences in outlook between white women and those from an ethnic minority background. So you might expect women of colour to be more likely to, you know, to say that they feel the country is racist, for example, because they're more likely to be on the receiving end of racism, but it's actually the opposite.
It is the opposite way around. So yeah, white women in this country, young white women, sorry, I should specify, think that the country is racist. Ethnic minority women do not overall think it is racist. They're actually tied on the question, but they're significantly less likely to say that it's racist than their white peers. And I think that's interesting. That's interesting in and of itself, but that it extends into other issues as well. So actually, young ethnic minority women are much more likely to say they feel valued by the country. They're much more likely to say they feel positively about improving their life chances, you know, about things like being in a better position than their parents, about earning a decent amount, getting a house one day. All of these issues, they feel like they're much more positive and have more of a stake potentially in society, or feel like they do, than their white peers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because
that's so, dude. Oh my god. Oh, dude, if you're watching this, thank you so much for recommending this. This is fantastic. This is amazing. The white women are upset for the black women, for the country being racist. It's so good. And the black women were like, nah, it's fine. We're good. It's not that deep. It's not that I got other concerns, bro. It's not that deep. And then white women are like, oh no, I'll carry your trauma for you. I'll feel like this for you. It's like, bro, drop it. Okay? This is why so many people watch like those Bravo shows, you know, those fucking reality TV shows, because their life is too serene, too peaceful, so they gotta import the drama. That's what white women do.
a lot of the undercurrent of your piece and of your research is that this generation of women don't like the country. They don't feel a sense of national pride. They don't feel like it's giving much to them, and they don't feel like they have a place in this country. Does that come up?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably because they've been told and indoctrinated to hate their country, especially so this is for the UK, of course. For the UK, yeah, they've probably been raised through the education system to loathe and feel guilty for the British Empire, even though the British Empire is probably the single most greatest positive force for civilization, even with colonization, especially considering colonization with colonization. Yes, the Brits should be proud of their history. Not every bit of it, but broadly, they've been an incredible net good. The Brits are the ones who got rid of slavery, by the way. Kudos to them. So, yeah, duh. If you're raised your entire childhood to hate your country, yeah, you're going to hate your country. And if you're taught, especially if you're white, to hate your ancestors because they built the country, they ran the empire, those mean old white people. Ridiculous.
Absolutely. Ash said there's nothing for me here. I don't think anyone was positive about Starmer, and these are. I don't think any of them felt positive about Britain in any way. Even if they had personal goals they were excited for, which a lot of them didn't, they didn't feel. They felt incredibly pessimistic about the way the country's going. They were terrified about reform specifically, but even the government as it is, which they were just very, very negative about.
Yeah, and that has implications, real world implications potentially, because one of the reasons they're terrified of reform, and one of the, perhaps one of the reasons why they're reluctant to start a family, is that they don't have much hope in their sort of future economic circumstances, but they're scared that reform might sort of, I don't know, force them into family values that they don't have, for example.
Yes.
And, this is such a big conversation on the left and right, is the falling birth rate. And there's a discrepancy again with how likely young women are to feel that they would like to have children compared with what young men would like.
Yeah, and so we're still talking about quite small numbers here, but young women are much less likely than young men to say they would like children. And again, this is particularly pronounced amongst white women under 30, one in five of whom say they would not like children. And that's not sort of like now, that's a ever. And obviously they might change their views over time and all the rest of it, but they're sort of starting out their journey in terms of viewing relationships or approaching people with that view in mind, in a way that the young men their age don't seem to be in to the same extent.
Yeah, that is one of the most interesting things about this point in human history, and I mean like the contemporary period that we live in, right at the current moment, the present moment. Never in history before have you ever had a moment where young men wanted children more than young women. And it's not like normally it's young men here and young women here, and like it's only gone like this. It's gone like this. I want kids. A lot of other young men want to have children. They want a family. But it's increasingly the young women who are pushing I want to go to school first. I want to go to career first. I want to do this. I want to travel first. I was listening to a thing by Sophie Rain. She was on Peers with James Fishback. And I'm not even sure how old she really is, but she said on the show that she was 22 or 25, something like that. And she had never even considered, the thought had never even entered her mind to have kids. Listen, take what she says with a grain of salt. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that young women have been engineered to be socially engineered, brainwashed, and indoctrinated to not want kids, to view family as a shackle, as a limiter, to be keeping them in the kitchen. They've been told to want the opposite of what they're biologically supposed to want. And they feel as if conceding that their biological inclinations are correct is like a fundamental betrayal of the coding in their brain. So they're in a really tough spot.
Yeah. Did you speak about starting families with the women that you were talking to?
A lot of them were not sure. Some were anti, a lot weren't sure, but they'd spoken. All of them definitely didn't want kids by 30. And I spoke to one girl who'd done some polling of herself just in her year group. She just asked, and I think she asked like 15 young men and 15 young women, and almost all the young men said they wanted kids by 30, and like basically none of the young women wanted.
So interesting.
And I think,
oh my God, none of the young women wanted kids by 30 years old? I'm in my early 20s, okay? If I want at least two, maybe even three kids by the time I'm 30. women don't even want a kid by 30? Oh my God, that is crazy. And we wonder why the birth rates are the way that they are. The sexual revolution and feminism more broadly made a really twisted deal. They said, why don't you spend the most fertile time in your life, the late teenagers, so like 18, 19, and your whole 20s, why don't you spend that going through schooling and then a career? Then once you have all that buckled down, then you find a husband, then you start a family. When it should be the other way around. You should have your family first, raise your kids, and then later on, when your nest is empty, then you go to school, then you have a career. Do the opposite way around. And if you do it the opposite way around, you don't have to worry about IVF. You don't have to worry about fertility issues. You don't have to worry about high-risk pregnancies. You don't have to worry about what used to be called geriatric pregnancies, but what are now euphemistically called high-risk pregnancies. Bullshit. Get the hell out of here.
And they would view that as totally like, well, it's men's fault for not doing enough. They see scary things about trad wives on the internet.
Right.
They see scary things about reform. They see pro-maternity, pro-natalist policies that scare them. They see things about abortion rights that scare them. And it's just,
Anything to kill those kids, right?
There's not really they don't see any obvious reason to have it.
Just think about that for just one moment. All right. Just when it comes to abortion as an issue, just kind of turn you, just put out aside for a second. We have engineered mothers or prospective mothers to be flippant about their offspring so far as to just be like, kill it, murder it. And that's so important to me that I am going to make it a single issue of mine for politics. My ability to murder my children, murder babies.
And so this gets in the way of relationships between young men and women, presumably, although some of the women you spoke to did go out with men. But also it has implications in terms of party politics. I think every interviewee in your piece were talking about voting Green, I think, or potentially Labour. Have you noticed a split in terms of voting intention?
There is a split in terms of voting intention, and again, it's not the split that people think necessarily. I mean, It is and it isn't. So I think again, there were part of this narrative about young men, and actually Reform themselves were leaning into this because I think it helped them to feel like they were very had a huge appeal amongst young men, even if not young women. But actually, young men are still less likely to vote for Reform than any other generation of men. They're some of the least likely to vote Reform in the country. Most voting intention polls actually have young men just as likely to vote Green as Reform, if not more likely to vote for the Greens. So, it's not that this is being driven by young men in terms of their voting going dramatically to the right. But what is happening is that young women are in huge numbers going to the left. Now, we could even see this was visible at the last election, even when the Greens didn't do very well overall, or, they had the best electoral performance, but still, not the sorts of numbers we're now seeing in the polls. And that has only grown since then. And I think when you look into their views of these figures and these parties, and I think what's quite interesting is I think what we're getting at is, it's not just political questions, their politics are underpinned by their values, which they don't want to compromise on and which they hold very closely. Their ideological and cultural values comes first and politics second. And partly as a result of that, they are relentlessly negative about Keir Starmer, about the Labour Party. And I think a lot of this hasn't been priced in because I think a lot of Labour, or, I think they may be waking up to it now, but just think these women will come home. I think they just think, they're a bit cross. Okay, fine. They don't like us very much. They don't like all the stuff we do with the flag, whatever it is. But ultimately, they will come back to us because that's what young women and, sort of slightly older young women do. And actually what we're seeing is that it looks like they're just going to go further away.
Yes.
Yeah, that plays out. There was a famous graph years ago where it was kind of showing the branching off of political ideation in young people, and what she said is absolutely correct. young men are kind of going to the right, but it's not like a radical swing, right? It's not like they're like spiking. But they're branching more to the right than previous generations did, but it's not like a crazy, unbelievable, astronomical amount. On the other hand, women are being radically, exponentially radicalized to the left. On that graph, young men were kind of breaking earlier, but young women were just going up. Or I guess for you guys, it would be kind of men were going up, but young women were just going way up. Like it was like a 30, 40 point difference in terms of young women being that much further to the left than young men. That political divide, which is now manifesting in Korea, for example, is leading to a dramatic decrease in the fertility rates. Because as they said, and they're very correct, the young women are putting their certain values that are kind of inherently political in nature as the things that they cannot compromise on. And that is because, and like I said earlier tonight, having those principles in and of itself is not wrong. You should have those core values that is like, okay, before we even start talking about a relationship or about the future, about a family, we need to agree on religion, family structure, gender, all that kind of stuff. So there aren't things like that. So they're not wrong on that end. What they're wrong about is that the natural feminine worldview or the kind of more liberal worldview, have you guys seen that thing where it's like the heat map? It's like in the center, it's like you and your family and your community, then it like branches out. And then there's like a heat map where conservatives are like hot here and they go cool here. And liberals are like cool here and they go hot, or hot in the outside and they cool down more to the inside. That's exactly how women vote. That is why they care about the Greens and they care about they're so toxically empathetic, is because they value things that are not in their immediate orbit, things that are disconnected from them more broadly, rather than the immediate kind of surrounding people. That's why they hate their country. That's why they care more about refugees than their neighbors. That is why. So, what she just said there, not surprised me at all.
It's really interesting because I do remember sort of in the Cameron years writing about David Cameron's woman problem and, the Conservatives could never sort of do better among women than Labour could. And perhaps there's still that old assumption in the Labour Party that, eventually women will come back to them and there's not really anywhere else for them to go.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have assumed that for a long time, and I think they're going to we'll see in how greater numbers they vote, for example, because turnout can be quite low amongst younger groups. But I think there could be some people I think could be in for quite a nasty surprise about how hard it is to get those voters back.
Yeah, and generally I know that we used to talk about this, the motivating voting issues for women voters, usually similar to men, but perhaps a bit more emphasis on the NHS, childcare, schooling, the things that they might be more involved in their family setup than.
Yeah, things that typically a more traditional, mommy stays home, daddy goes to work, things that family structure would account for, because they're replacing the daddy with state, that's why they care about those issues.
Than the men might. In terms of this generation, these Gen Z women that we're talking about, are the motivating factors the things that we've been talking about, climate change, how they feel about Israel, Palestine, Trump, those kind of issues? Yeah,
definitely. So they're still very much concerned about the cost of living, and again, but they firmly see the solution to that through a redistributive lens. That's what they would like to see, and they're very agitated about housing costs and things like that. They would be a fan of Zach Palansky's policy announcements about rent controls, for example. So it's sort of economics, but with that spin on it. And then otherwise, you're absolutely right. Issues that are more important to them absolutely include things like the Israel-Gaza conflict, much more important to young women than it is for a lot of the rest of the population. And then they do loathe Donald Trump, and they are genuinely fearful of Donald Trump. And I was speaking to some in focus groups actually in London over the last couple of weeks, and they actually even were saying, well, we don't want the country, even though we're really cross, we actually don't want the country to get weaker because that will help Donald Trump. So, that they are framing quite a lot of our national politics in terms of what's going on in America. And I think that is partly because that's what a lot of their media, we're talking about online. A lot of that is framed in terms of American politics and their political discussions.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think particularly on the right of politics, there's this image of sort of overeducated young women who come out of university with these kind of radical political opinions, and they're the reason why we're not getting enough babies born and that kind of thing. I mean, is there any sort of grain of truth in that, frankly?
Before she gives her answer, that is absolutely an issue. And I don't know, like I said, I haven't seen this video, so I don't even know what the hell she's going to say. But on the topic of potentially women becoming overeducated, there is a certain dynamic in how statuses affect the dating between the sexes. What do I mean? Okay, so let's say that there's two tiers. So there's a bottom, there's a middle, and there's a high. For men, they're very comfortable dating across the status or dating down. So let's say you have a guy who's making $80,000 to $100,000. He's perfectly okay with either dating or being with somebody who's either making $80,000, $60,000, or $100,000, or like a McDonald's worker. He's perfectly okay with that. What he's not willing to do is date up in status. So he's not going to want to date someone who's like making $500,000, who may be in upper management and executive, because they almost feel like emasculated. Whereas for women, they also are willing to date across. Right, so if they are middle class, they'll date middle class. They'll also date up in status, so they'll date someone who's richer, someone who could provide more resources. What they do not want to do is date down in status. So a middle class girl is less likely to want to be with somebody who's probably in a lower class setting. If you're a guy, this is why women chase kind of the male who has the most capacity for or ability to acquire resources to provide, whereas men are just kind of looking for who's most kind of fertile, who's going to be the best mother, the best wife, who's going to build the best home, while also kind of having that gauging of not respect in a way, but it's kind of like role, like I need to be like the man of the house, a breadwinner. So if you're making more than me, that kind of affects that.
I mean, I do think they probably are. Maybe perhaps they are spending more time online, and that's why that's part. And that message is being reinforced. Universities are left wing. They're with a group of people who feel the same. It becomes a bubble where they think that. I mean,
you do have those differences of opinion between the ones with degrees and
they're in a bubble where people think like that. I mean, it's natural to look at America and be scared of it. I think America came up a lot with everyone. They were all worried about Trump. They take it as almost as much as like Britain. It's a problem for them. I mean. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily blame them for it, because when you speak to them, you just feel they're quite compelling about all these issues. They describe, graduating into a world where they're watching war on the internet, that they feel like their government doesn't get them and it doesn't care about the things they care about, and young men don't care about the things they care about. You feel very sympathetic towards them because they're identifying real issues, and if they want to opt out, why not? But obviously it has very bad ramifications for British society if one group's so alienated.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I think
most of the fact that is that they're alienating themselves mostly. They're making themselves like I don't necessarily, for some of them they're purposely making themselves unattractive, but for others they're doing it unintentionally. They're being told or kind of engineered or societally pushed or groomed, I guess you could say, to be more inclined to do things that are typically, or things that they may not have otherwise been kind of gravitated to because of the social engineering. And that in of itself is making them unattractive, which is isolating them. So
you mentioned it, Scarlett, but the way that they feel more positively about communism and socialism than they do about capitalism. Is that right?
Yeah,
it's quite a big shift, isn't it?
That is, yeah. I mean, I was quite, so overall women have a sort of we say +2 view of capitalism, so just about in net positive.
Right.
But they have a much more favourable view of communism. It's on +11. So, they do feel much more favourably inclined towards communism. One of the interesting divides I found, because I do think, what you're just saying, it depends what spin you want to put on it, but the data does bear out that, especially white, but, middle class, educated women do feel these things more strongly than the rest of that cohort. But what's really interesting as well, I think, is that there's a huge difference between what I call the COVID, or many people call the COVID generation,
right,
and their slightly older peers. So if we break out the sort of 18 to 25-year-olds versus the 25 to 30-year-olds, the 18 to 25-year-olds feel these things much more extremely. And with the 18 to 25-year-olds, so poor is their view of capitalism that they actually have as favourable view of fascism. Now, I'm not suggesting that all these under 25s are fascists. They are very clearly not. They're very, very far from that. but I thought that was the bit that really made my jaw drop.
That's amazing. And I suppose
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I've made this video before about in the Fed, Ron Paul. During the pandemic, during 2020, I'm going to speak from the United States perspective here. The United States increased the money supply in the country by 25% during the pandemic alone. Okay, In-N-Out posted on X their menu, their drive-through menu, back $4.20 on 2016, for reference of the prices today. Inflation is radicalizing my generation, and for good reason. They can't afford homes. They can barely afford cars, and they don't have jobs that allow them to afford the things that they need. And mostly because they aren't in a position, in some cases, to warrant that job. But that's not their fault necessarily. That's the economy and the schooling system not preparing them for that. Instead, what we're doing is we're getting cheap migrants who are going to do the jobs anyway. Or we just lost jobs altogether to Mexico themselves or to China. So they're not having any jobs. Everything costs more. So yeah, it's going to be radicalizing. And they see capitalism as a system that perpetuated that injustice, that ushered in that inequality. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
we haven't talked about COVID, but that is, I mean, that's such a big percentage of some of these women's lives. They're so young, and it was their formative years that were impacted by this, whether they were at university or whether they're at school. How far did you find that being something that they would sort of refer back to as the thing that kind of radicalized them? Sounds pejorative, but sort of led them to where they are now.
I really think that is a massive factor in it. I mean, they didn't cite it so much, but you have to think, well, because I'm 28, so I'm just sort of just a bit older than these people. And at school, I was part of these feminist society, and at university, these kind of protests. I was sort of in that kind of world, but I was trying to think, what's the difference between my experience of it, where everyone was talking about progressive things and fourth wave feminism and all that stuff. What's the difference between that and these people now? And it is just that this overwhelming bleakness that I don't recognize that at all from when I was at school and when I was at university. I don't remember this sense of being totally done with men. I think people were angry about things and people were excited about new ideas, and it was sort of
and there were
books to read. There were all these
journalists writing, interesting new things. Everyday sexism was suddenly a concept that you might not have used before, like that phrase.
Totally, Me Too, Rosettes for BLM. There were all these movements and all these new concepts like microaggressions, all this stuff, and it was we learned about all of it. I don't remember the nihilism and the negativity. That I don't remember, and I do think. I mean, I think the war in Gaza is another big thing that probably made them feel really detached. But I think COVID, I mean, that time feeling alone and isolated and watching more and more on the internet and getting more segregated, I just think that's a huge difference.
Yeah. And lastly, I mean, is there anything, I mean, it's pretty...
Yeah, I mean, I was in high school when the pandemic happened. I was fully remote for my junior year. And so, COVID really radicalized a lot in my generation, and I think for good reason. It really, I don't think it really radicalized the worldview, but much of it impacted our social skills. almost to like an irreparable degree. Um, it's social distancing. You had difficulties kind of connecting on personal levels in a very formative time in your life, or in my life, that is, rather. So, yeah, COVID is an event. Oh my God, Gen Alpha, or even the youngest part of Gen Z who had to kind of go through kindergarten or elementary school during the pandemic. They are. I mean, we're not going to see them for another what 4 years, 5, 6, 7 years. But once they enter the world, the adult world, the real world, those people are going to be seriously stunted, and it's because of the shutdown. It's because of the whole COVID overreaction. So,
Bleak for Labour, isn't it? Because
in the home stretch here,
they feel so sort of pessimistic about the current government. What would you do if you were in Starmer's team and you were looking at these figures? I mean, is there anything that could win these women back?
I think it's very difficult to know, and I think the problem they will have is if they. I think firstly that these women do. I think until sort of Zach Plansky and the Green Party, which is a very new phenomenon and hasn't even filtered down to a lot of these young women yet. I think the ones you spoke to very positively, but it's still not actually hugely known amongst the public. So I think that we will see that accelerate over the next year. But no one's been trying to speak to them, I think. No one's been sort of acknowledging that they feel locked out of or at odds with society. I do think it is difficult, though, because they increasingly look like a sort of unreconcilable part of the coalition, if that makes sense, because of the things that are most important to them. I suspect if you're in parts of Labour, there'll be parts of Labour that strongly agree with them on lots of this, by the way. You know, some of the PLP and things like that will have a huge amount of sympathy for these young women's views. But it's difficult when if these young women are holding dear to them and things they won't compromise on, which are then toxic to other parts of the electorate. You know, so I think it's a very difficult balancing act for Labour specifically, although it's something that Labour, the Greens, I think, you know, the next election is increasingly look like a battle between coalitions. They're going to have to, whatever sort of coalition takes form in the left, it's going to have to start factoring some of this stuff in and working out how to reconcile it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, both.
all right. So that was Why Do Young Women Hate Men? That was from the Statesmen. That, like I said a little bit earlier tonight, that video had kind of exploded a little bit in popularity, but I hadn't actually seen that video before. Main takeaways from the video: early on, they had the stats where young men largely were they had favorable views of young women. They didn't they weren't kind of repulsed by them. But for young women especially under 25, which just was not the case. Only 35% of them had favorable views of men, which is very problematic. And this sentiment echoed on throughout the night. Let me see if you guys had any comments here. There you go. Let me go here. Could use a reminder. Mic is messed up. Turn up your gain. Mike Mason. All right. Let's go through here a little bit to see what's going on. It's not just inflation, it's currency displacement. Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so some of the main takeaways from the video more broadly, the gender relations aren't very good, so that's not very surprising to see there. More broadly, you had a lot of the kind of coalition, a lot of UK political kind of references, which of course, because I'm an American, it's kind of hard to kind of adjust and kind of feel where they're coming from in that regard. And so do appreciate the $2 there, by the way. So thank you very much for that. Do appreciate the support. What else did they kind of bring up in the video there? At the very tail end, they kind of were talking about how labor was going, how they could kind of adjust to the young women there. And that is the that is kind of the difficulty in terms of coalition politics. This is why Donald Trump tried to kind of have this kind of Big Ten coalition, But the problem is with that is if you make your tent too big, you really have a lot of difficulties kind of keeping everyone together after you win. I heard Joe Budden say before that the consequence of victory in politics is division. And so when your common enemy is gone, that it being for Americans, for Republicans, 24 is Kamala Harris, once you defeat the Democrats, now it actually comes down to enacting the agenda. And since you have such a large tent, you gotta have horses pulling in different directions, and the carriage really doesn't go anywhere. So I think when it comes to addressing the radicalized issues that young people have, it's going to go. I don't think they're going to create another party like in the UK. That there's like a new fucking party every weekend. So in that case, while I wish Restore as all the luck in in the future, I really don't really see that kind of happening here. But what I do see happening here is young people in their radicalized politics taking a hostile takeover of the Republican Party. That's kind of where I see it happening. And you could see a side of that happening a little bit later in with UK and politics there, but it doesn't work in the Big 26. You just have to go from a radical position and show people you can get things done. Yeah, that's basically it. And that's why early in Trump's administration, when he was a strongman, where he was playing the king, he had executive orders going everywhere. He was shutting down the border. He was doing all these, the things of mass deportations. He was doing the tariffs. He was telling Europe to go screw themselves. But he stopped that. He started listening to the courts. He let them kind of take them away. And because of that, he lost popularity rapidly. He didn't follow through on the Epstein files. He didn't follow through on kind of broad transparency in a way that really kind of spoke to young people. He chose boomers over Gen Z. And because of that, they ignored them. And his approval rating was much higher back then, 50%. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is something that I've been saying on this channel for forever. I mean, when Trump was being a strong guy and he was enacting change and he could see that, his popularity among the youth skyrocketed. I mean, it was sky high. Then once he let the courts tell him what to do and he gave up largely, dude, Minneapolis was absolutely embarrassing. He was cucked. He had a perfect opportunity to enact the Insurrection Act, to enact his will in the people, to say, you know what, no. The youth voted for me. The country, over half the country voted for me, so I'm going to enact my agenda. Instead, he let two retards who lost their lives because they're being stupid. Less so in Preddy's case, because that was just kind of a case where it was unfortunate. He shouldn't have been resisting arrest at all in the first place, but he just had a very unfortunate gun, and it was a really unfortunate series of events. But nonetheless, two people were enough, along with some negative press by the media, to bring the mass deportations to a screeching halt. Epstein could not have been handled any worse than it was. And Trump is now being paraded and led around everywhere by the courts. The courts basically tell him what kind of fucking toilet paper he can use. Listen, if Trump wants the youth back, he has to not be afraid to be a strongman again. 3-pronged national emergency needs to be called. One for the border crisis, one for inner-city crime, and one for foreign influence in the political system. Absolutely. 110% there. Now, while I will say, while I have ragged on the President Trump forever on certain issues, I will not sit here and tell you that there aren't certain things that I like his approach on or like that he followed through on. The border is sealed. So that is good. I'd rather have no people crossing the border than Biden-level people crossing the border. So you have me on that. I like the Venezuela operation. I thought that was very good show of military, um, United States military might. Let me put my AirPods away since I'm not really watching the video anymore. And the approach to tariffs, the protectionism, I like that as well. So in those cases, I'll always give Trump credit in that regard. But with other things, the Epstein files was a huge mess up. All the scams are happening with this administration. You have Lutnick. You have, Lutnick again, probably with the oil short that happened over the weekend. You have just a litany of these scandals that are going on. You have allegedly Chrissy Nome having an affair with Corey Lewandowski. So these two things, all of these things encapsulate into a profile of a candidate that has betrayed its voters, the very voters that are going to be the future of politics. And just like how, I think the UK is going to see this pretty soon, these young people who aren't going to have their grievances heard are not going anywhere. They're either going to stay just as radical or get more radicalized. So, in that regard, I think that's what you can kind of expect going forward. It's really disappointing, and I saw your comment on Trump still being marginally better than Kamala. If she won in 24, we'd likely have another 3 million illegals over the last 15 months. Very, very true. But to GOP Republicans out there, anybody who's still kind of broadly defending this administration, saying, oh, if we don't win in November, it's going to be Biden all over again. That is a defeatist attitude. And you're either doing it on purpose or subconsciously. And you're either defending the administration or apologizing for the administration. If you're doing it unconsciously, what you're doing is you're creating like an either or thing where it's like, listen, I understand you might be upset with Trump, but we can't let Democrats win, right? On the other hand, what you might be doing is you might be saying that, listen, I understand that, this is all happening, but essentially you're making everyone held politically hostage. This is supposed to be a representative democracy, constitutional republic, but we're supposed to be represented by our politician. We're going to be fed the same slop this November. We're going to lose our country, Democrats win. So if your defense of Trump, if the reason why we have to vote for Trump in November is because of the Democrats getting in power, they're going to be worse, then you know what? Maybe Trump has to lose. Because we're creating a moral hazard having this unconditional support for GOP. Unconditional support for GOP. And if you've watched me before, apologies if I sound a little bit like a broken record here, but this is something that really exercises me, to be completely honest with you. I really cannot stand it. Because it is running flack for the exact politicians that we're supposed to be enacting accountability on them through this metric. This is how we're supposed to do it. But for some reason, we're being shamed out of it. I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why. Because it's easier that way. Because Trump has failed on critical issues. If the Democrats moderated, the MAGA crowd would have no real foundation or kind of place to stand on in terms of their defense of Donald Trump. They wouldn't. Because if you ran like a Joe Biden, like an actual Joe Biden Democrat party in the midterms that's more moderate, GOP's going to get slammed. And we don't really care to Dems take the House at this point. GOP deserves it. It's not like the Dems could do anything anyway. Just 2 years of deadlocked, and hopefully we get a serious candidate in 28. Absolutely, 100%. The 2026 midterms is not the end of the world. All right, listen. They're acting as if we're gonna be telling these people to vote for Gavin Newsom in 28. This is ridiculous. This is not it. The point is that right now, oh my God, dude, and it's even better because they say like, oh, you don't want Republicans to win in November, so how are you supposed to do anything? You have power now, you idiot. How about you do something now? You're proving to me, you're showing me exactly what is possible when we have all 3 chambers of Congress. Or both chambers of Congress, or depending on how you look at it. If this is what you do with power, then you don't deserve power. And it's like, oh, well, Newsom does Mog Vance. And listen, if you cannot admit that Newsom mogs Vance, you're a lost cause. You might as well just be like a cat turd, or was it Eric? Oh, what's that guy's name? Was it Eric Dougherty on X? Oh my gosh. That guy's unbelievable. That guy's terrible. Forgetting candidates who isn't MAGA neocon and will oppose the war in Iran will immediately register GOP and campaign for that candidate. We can see an America First guy. That's literally it. And I've been going back and forth a lot in the group chat with some of my buddies about James Fishback. And listen, James Fishback is probably not going to win a Florida primary. Probably not going to win a Florida primary. That doesn't matter, though. That's not what matters. What matters is, what is the vote margin going to be for the Florida GOP primary? Listen, Byron Donalds, for all intents and purposes, is most likely going to win that race. Chad, he knows. If we, like I said, we all know that Byron Donalds is most likely, barring an act of God, going to win that Florida GOP primary. But what is important is how many votes, or the share of the vote, that Fishback gets. Because Fishback, if he gets even like double-digit support, if he gets 20%, 25% of the vote, that is a massive political victory. Especially for 2026. Because he is an embodiment of the online right. He is the online right personified. Listen, anybody who unironically says Foyd as part of their campaign is a part of the online right, okay? So Fishback is the online right candidate. And if he has any sort of substantial portion of the populace, of the voting base, that is going to send shockwaves throughout the other states, and is going to be a kind of a warning sign to the GOP more nationally, as it should be. Listen, this administration, Trump administration, has been too busy doing all these scams, quite frankly, and not busy enough doing what we voted on. Anybody who talked about mocking is online Gen Z, right? Yes, yes, they are. Tucker Teal 28. That's fun. Yeah, I don't think Tucker. I mean, if you were gonna run, if Tucker was ever gonna run for president, he should probably do it in 28. To be honest with you, but I just don't see him doing it. Listen, he's a great shit stirrer, but I couldn't tell you like 3 things he actually believes in. Because it really kind of depends. It seems to depend on who he's talking to on that particular episode, which sucks because it's kind of hard to kind of gauge what he's going to think about things. But nonetheless, a new buddy, but you talk about mogging as Gen Z, right? So, yeah, I mean, the GOP in November is going to have to really learn. Brother Tucker had his brother on today, and it was great. I didn't. Oh, is that what it was? I did see Carlson in the title. I didn't know it was his brother, but yeah, I hope that Should Haley Romney in 26? That's a winning ticket right there. Anti-abortion, white restoration, America first. That's nice. Um, should the Democrats take power or win in November and take power in January? I hope that I have like a list of people I want to be investigated. Number one on that list is Howard Lutnick. I want to get him probed so deep. Next is probably going to be Pam Bondi. And then the next is going to be Jared Kushner. And I just saw that the labor secretary, that's Tucker. Big numbers out loud chat. Sorry. um, I think yeah, it was a labor secretary who just stood down. Need to win to restrain the admin. So I think that was the latest person who kind of stepped down here. But yeah, Lutnick, Bondi, Kushner need to be investigated. And I hope that, listen, Republicans aren't going to do it, so the Dems need to. And they deserve to be impeached. These people, well, you can't impeach Bondi because she's out of there now. But Lutnick needs to be impeached. And the reason why these people deserve to have this happen to them is because they're not smart enough to protect themselves. I think I said this on Friday. Listen, if you're going to do shady shit, listen, no administration is angelic. Okay? What they call, like Barack Obama was no drama Obama, yet he did Fast and Furious, and then he was going after churches for not giving like birth control. So no administration is clean, okay? But they were also smart enough to not get caught. But this Trump administration is so retardedly brazen with it that they don't. Howard Lutnick appears to very obviously have benefited from the tariff refunds. And there's a lot of suspicious trading that happened within the Trump administration on the oil shorting. When Trump announced that the strait was open, and all the boats had to turn around. Huge shorting on that. I lost $50 on Trump coin. Well, that's your fault. Whites were 90% of the United States in 64. Now they're 57 or something. Who's going to reverse this? So, that's another thing that kind of was brought up in this video. The birth rates, which next to mass deportations, which I kind of mentioned was like an existential issue in this country, the birth rates are quite literally, by definition, an existential threat. And unlike mass deportations and mass migration, which is kind of like a foreigner coming into the native domestic kind of environment, atmosphere, the birth rates are solely a domestic thing, which is why there's a huge demand for Democrats and Republicans to import these voters in the first place, because we aren't naturally replenishing them ourselves. The birth rates are a critical issue. And most of it is because of what I kind of lined up a little bit earlier. Liberal women have something like a 0.6 birth rate. Yeah, it's crazy. And conservatives aren't above replacement, but they're scaling back up. The reason for that is what I kind of lined on earlier in the stream here tonight. It is women spending their fertile child-rearing years in college and in the C-suite. That's why. And because of this, because they have to be these competitive economic units, they vote to the orcs in and then cry when they don't feel safe. Yeah, it's crazy. As long as the war machine is well oiled, everything will be fine, right, guys? Because they're going into these careers, because they're going into college, they are being socially engineered to view men as the opposition, as the opponent, as the competitor, not as a potential partner or a spouse, but as the enemy. Especially if it's like this misogynistic thing they're trying to push. That's what it is. Number one factor driving up the birth rates is women working and pursuing higher education. Exactly. So that it's twisted. What needs to happen? Women can even have it the both ways. They could have it both ways. All they had to do is needed to have the kids first. They had the family first. Have the kids when you're fertile, 18, 19, and all through the 20s, right? They're pushing misandry, not misogyny. Have your kids early in life, raise them, and then once you have that empty nest, then you go to college, then you have a career. By then, you should be much more in a position to afford college, to afford and to enter in the workforce, rather than doing all that first, right? So you're gonna go to school for 4 years. You might even go to school for 6 years to get your master's. So you're coming into the workforce at 24, 25. You're just kind of getting your shit straight. You're on the landing strip now. You're going. You're taking off, and just when you're about to go and really take off, when you're like 30, is when you go ahead and have kids, and now you're going to go on maternity leave. And for a lot of women, they're going to have like 1, 2, or 3 kids. And so they're going to take multiple times maternity leave. And so then you're going to come back and then like your whole career is stunted. And now you're basically almost like starting from scratch. Our bosses and women-led households are not good though. Yeah, I never said that they were. I never said that they were. I'm just saying that they could theoretically do it both ways and still they could have their cake and eat it too. But I mean, there's nothing wrong necessarily in principle with a mother who has her kids moved out of the house, going to college and then having a career, necessarily. I mean, I think we'd all prefer them being like the grandparent and helping with the kids, kind of having that kind of family raising. France, Sweden had some success reviving the birth rates by splitting the care of children 50-50, still below replacement. I still like the Hungarian model with the eventually kind of abolishing the income tax once you have 4 kids. I really like that idea. Christianity does not prohibit women working as long as it's done with the guidance of their husbands. So, but the girl bosses and the women-led households, that is one of the biggest reasons why young men are kind of really, I don't want to say intimidated because they kind of have a certain connotation to it, but they feel emasculated. They don't really feel attracted to the women, mostly because they're not really feeling as if they are the breadwinners. That's how it kind of comes off as. And because of that, they don't really feel like the man in the relationship, which is important to the psyche of both the women and the men in a relationship. And it's not propaganda. That's not all this kind of stuff. Oh my God, imagine Daniel Beacons. There's a stay-at-home boyfriend trend I think I saw the other day. And it's all just these cucked guys. They're just simps. That's all it is. Eddie, you showed me that thing the other day of the of the guy. I'm gonna say home boyfriend. I'm gonna say home guy. No, but it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane. Stay at home partner. Oh my God, no, it's crazy, dude. It's so crazy. So yeah, there was that guy it was a stepdad. That's what it was. It was a stepdad. And then it's it was the stay-at-home stepdad is what it was, and he really didn't get a lot of attention from his. I don't know if they were married or not. Dating life of a stepdad. That's right. And he didn't really get a lot. I don't know if his girlfriend or his wife officially, but at the very end of it, they were sitting at dinner, and the kid was mixed. And so the whole thing just kind of blew up from there. But I thought that was really funny. But I think that he was dating life was it just as a stepdad, a stay-at-home stepdad with a hot and sexy wife. Did I send it to you? I'm not sure if I sent it to you or not. It was an Instagram thing. I'm not sure if I sent it to you. I will. I will send it to you. But yeah. Listen, if you are a stay-at-home boyfriend, and it's because your girlfriend went to college and is now making. That's how he opens up each video. Tel Aviv Press. If that's how you like, what are you doing? Really? Your ancestors died storming the beaches of Normandy. Your ancestors died fighting the Nazis, fighting the Soviets. And you're staying home because your girlfriend makes more than you. Do you understand where this is sounding wrong or incomplete? Is it connecting? Because I hope it is. Once in a while, I kind of remind myself, you need to remind yourself of how far your ancestors came in order for you to exist. So a lot of people had to meet each other, like your great 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 grandfather had to meet your great 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 grandmother, and then a series of events had to happen in order for you to come into existence. And now this is especially the case for men, right? Not so much for women. Men, especially sons, they understand. They feel the biological expectation to continue the bloodline. Because my great great grandfather, my great grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad did not all sacrifice, meet their respective wives, have their children in a succession like this. Every single one of your ancestors led their household. Yeah, dude, it's unbelievable. But nonetheless, your ancestors, everything had to line up in a certain way in order for you to come into existence. And so sons have this knowledge. It's biological. It's primal. To be like, okay, listen, this is why men want to have sons so bad. Because it's like, okay, you have a kid, right? And it's a daughter. And you're like, I'm happy that they're healthy. I'm happy that it's a daughter. But we need to try for another one. And it's not until you get that son. It's not until you get that son where you kind of take a little bit of a sigh, like, okay, we just have to make sure he's not gay. We just need to make sure he's not gay. Okay, we just make sure he's not gay. And then, we'll have my last name will go to him, and now the burn's on him now. Now it's my job to make sure that he's raised to be a good husband, a good father, all that kind of stuff. Let's go back up here a little bit. It's also important, you haven't gone over is the prevalence of these women using SSRIs and birth control. Have I not really gone over that? I guess I haven't. Well, these women are all neurotic because they're going against their biological instincts. So yeah, they're all on antidepressants because they're so sad because they're not really being allowed to be naturally feminine. And they're all on birth control because they can't keep their legs closed. And so, especially when they go to college, I mean, they're riding the carousel, literally and figuratively. But birth control not only enables poor behavior, destroying your sexual value in the dating market, but you're also chemically changing your body. You're telling your body that you're pregnant when you're not. And because you're not pregnant, your body is like maladjusting to this fake prevalence of hormones in the body. So, Male social programming needing to overcome those basic instincts to act your part. Oh my God. Well, that's the whole project of the post-World War II America. Is to create this this system that, because that's what you need to be a soft totalitarian system to get these men and women, to get these young boys and girls to go against their natural instincts in order to fit this liberal cookie cutter mold. Boys rule, girls rule. Now, not because they can't keep their legs closed. Young girls get it prescribed to fix acne and regulate their periods. It's both. It's both. But I have heard about the young girls getting it prescribed to fix acne and to regulate their periods. I have heard of that before. So that is true. But at the college that I went to, I mean, there was birth control in the vending machines. It's like, really? You need it that much? That in and of itself is a problem. So, yeah, it's doing this stuff. I have heard about them using it to regulate their periods. The acne stuff is a little bit. I'm a little bit shadier on that kind of stuff, but vending machine plan B. Yeah, dude, it's nuts. It's crazy. No, it's crazy, bro. And it's like cheaper than it would be at the store, I think. Yeah, drink first of all. Absolutely crazy, dude. Yeah, college was like such a radicalizing experience for me, man. It was crazy. Once you see the machine and you look under the hood and you see the inner workings of things, you really can't ever look at things the same. You can't. When it comes to college, it's kind of like you stare into the abyss, and you know you stare at it long enough, and it stares back into you, man. It's bad. Oh, they give out 15 free condoms a month. Is that per student? Is that uh is that 15 free condoms per student a month? There's no way that's true. Per student? What? 15 free condoms a month for per student? Dude, assuming it's like February, that's like once, that's less than once every other day. I said this before, but I will always wondered if going to college would turn me into a lib, like it would rub off of me. I said, dude, went last year with my buddy. They give out lube too. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but no, when you go to college, you either come out a socialist or a fascist. There's really no in between. There's really no in between. Because you see the tendrils of the liberal order, of the liberal system, and what, you know, how the system was designed over decades. University is crazy. So yeah, when you go to college, you see the system that was kind of engineered and built. So either you see that and you either accept it wholesale or you reject it wholesale. That's why there's no real like in the middle. It would not lib you out. It's hard to get guys to get libbed out. As I'm saying, like you either become like a communist or you become a fascist. That's it. Remember back in 23 when the CRs were all Ben Shapiro fans, and look at the state of things now. Yeah, the club had certainly gone from a very moderate to it's basically kind of like a Groyper club now. It's kind of funny. When I first got into politics, it was all Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro. It's all the mindless majors that dominate the culture in college. When I was first getting into politics, it was largely Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder. That's it. I watched Ben Shapiro and the Yaf, and I watched Sub Koba. I watched Ben Shapiro, and then I watched Steven Crowder's Change My Mind. I would watch that religiously. I would rewatch the Change My Minds, and then I'd go to high school, and I would debate my teachers. dude, Alex Jones was like the crazy guy. I had never experienced college before, so I had no idea people would convince me to support abortion and trans. Penis breaker, dude, those videos are so good. I found the guy who made the penis breaker videos, and he has a whole compilation, like a whole playlist of them. And I just went through them all. Dude, that guy is the best. That guy is so good. He doesn't make them anymore, though. He retired. It's really sad. He retired from them. But, so yeah, I never really had a liberal phase. I did this in the video before in my kind of what radicalized me. I did it maybe about a year ago-ish. A couple months ago. No, actually more than a year ago. Almost like a year and a half ago at this point. Maybe almost two. Never liked Shapiro 21, Shapiro own libs compilation. No, I'm talking about like 2017, 2018. Ben Shapiro owning the libs, destroys, all that kind of stuff. I was a sucker for that. Even the Facebook videos that you'd see. Coma was ahead of the curve. He saw it at a time. Community college during COVID post 2020 is what got me. I kind of did community college during 2020, but what was I on there? Oh, so yeah, I never really had a lib phase. I had my neocon phase. Then I went to college, and then when I saw the whole trans stuff and the gay stuff, that put me on that made me like a MAGA guy, like a Make America, all that kind of stuff, or a Trump guy. And then I wasn't really pushed to the hard dissident right wing until Charlie Kirk. When Kirk got murdered, that was like the last or most recent radicalizing thing for me. I was already kind of growing. Prayers for Jordan Peterson. He may be dying right now. I did see a thing about Michaela talking about that. I do hope that he's all right. Prayers out for Jordan Peterson. But what was I gonna say? Y'all are killing my my chain of thought here. Oh, when Charlie Kirk got shot, and then seeing the reaction of the left, because we all knew that what the left was, but seeing them so openly, and it's crazy how like it's people who you didn't expect it from that hurt the most. It was like family members, cousins, and aunts that were like, you were like, all right, they're not that crazy. And then I had a chick at work talk about like how much Charlie Kirk was like burning in hell and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, really? He had kids, he had a family, and they're never gonna know their dad. So it took me until Kirk's death to realize how significant he was. I couldn't believe it. I remember talking with my editor about it. And he kind of seemed like an immortal figure. And so that was like a sobering political realization for me. Because like he was like, when a guy like that dies, you're expecting him to like do things in the future. And now that's not going to happen. So it's almost, you almost feel like robbed of what you thought was going to be. Is now no longer. Dude, Erica is never going to be the allegations. She's never going to be the allegations. The reason why she'd never make it in WWE is because the pyrotechnics are just not in the budget. I wonder if there'll be Iran. No, that's why I don't think it is. I think largely Charlie kept the 12-day war at the 12-day war because of Charlie. Charlie was the only guy who had Trump's ear about the youth. Once Charlie died is when Trump kind of became tone deaf about the issues facing the youth, about the affordability, about housing, about immigration, about AI, about war. Once Charlie died, he didn't have that influence in his ear. His top political advisor for the youth Yeah. And he started fucking stomping on rakes. Charlie Kirk was the most talented political activist by far, and he could have easily been president one day, 110%. What exactly was accomplished in the 12-Day War? Supposedly, we bombed the mountain. Charlie would have really had to grapple with the Israel issue coming up here if you're still around. Oh, if he was still around. I mean, he definitely would have had issues continuing to defend them. So that would have been interesting. Charlie was much more rational than people give him credit for. He was the moderate option. That's what bothers me. That's what bothers me the most. Is that they're like, oh, he's a fascist and all that kind of stuff. It's like, bro, he's the moderate option. And now people listen to Nick Fuentes. Like, careful what you wish for, buddy. Rachel reacted to Kirk's death seemed like it was the most minor inconvenience. Charlie was starting to ask some interesting questions about Israel in the months before his death. I feel like Tucker is becoming what Charlie was starting to become. Tucker Carlson is fundamentally, he's not a debater type guy. He knows how to handle the media very well, so he's not going to get got in interviews. But Tucker Carlson is not going to go to like a debate me series. He's not really going to have. He's not going to debate Tucker, Parker, or Dean, Parker, all that kind of stuff. He's not a debater, so he's not really a guy like that. Trump is a sociopath. You need to be ruthless, evil fuck if you want a career in politics. Yes, sir, you do. Absolutely. I mean, listen. If you're going into if you're running for politics, at a certain part, you're an egomaniac. So, at a certain point, that's just what you have to be. Well, that's just who you are already. So, in that way, it's kind of a done deal. But no, Charlie would have definitely become at least governor of Arizona. I don't know. He would have been the candidate for the MAGA youth for Gen Z, definitely 100%. But man, I really don't think the effect. Not to Mitch McConnell running for another term, is that official? No, I thought he was retiring. No, he's definitely retiring. The thought of how much influence Charlie Kirk did have in the administration in terms of influencing Trump on policy is unbelievable, and it's really like sad and disappointing, depressing. Because all you can really imagine or think about is what could have been. Whatever would we do without Mitch? Someone asked him. Yeah, I bet he fell off his chair when he was asked that question. Mitch has another 10 years, or Mitch has another 10 years. So, Mitch Haley 20 is crazy. Dude, how about them pushing that Nayland Haley guy? What was that? Nikki's son? That was cute, wasn't it? Lindsey Graham, Tulsi Gabbard, 28. Did you guys see that whole Nayland Haley? Nikki's son, and he was like almost like he was like a diet groiper. Massey Taylor Green. Dude, Tulsi Gabbard has to like hate herself right now. Bro. Tulsi Gabbard, dude. Tulsi Gabbard. Listen, she has that like that streak in her hair. That's kind of cool. But Tulsi Gabbard has gone against pretty much everything that she had ever politically. Diet Pepper or Diet Dr. Groip. Dude, it is so bad what happened to Tulsi Gabbard. Dude, she is like unrecognizable at this point. I'm voting for Rubio, but not Van. Dude, you can't vote for Marco Rubio. Koba, you're gonna vote for Marco Rubio? Unreal. You gotta be never Vance and never Rubio. You gotta be never Trump administration. Anybody from the Trump administration is a no. Okay, that's why you can't. I said this on Friday. This is why you can't impeach Donald Trump. Because as much as you dislike Donald Trump, Yeah, no, you're right. The streak in her hair is like an injury. Marco Goibia would have gotten more popularity as a Fuentes supporter. He would have. True, honestly, I want Tucker president. Tucker Trump admin is radioactive. It is radioactive, and I like fucking Alex Jones was kind of going over like, oh, the case for 25ing the president. All the, if you impeach Donald Trump, you give the establishment exactly what they want. You give Fox News exactly what they want, which is the ability to reframe JD Vance as America First. And it's going to kneecap. It's going to kneecap. Yes, Holly-handed Sisson. Is that like a porno? No. They're going to kneecap the America First movement with JD Vance, and they're going to take the wind out of the sail of any true America First movement. Which is why you need to keep Trump in office, but you just need to tie the millstone around Trump's neck that is MAGA, sink Trump to the bottom of the sea, metaphorically, of course, figuratively, and then you ruin the prospect of Vance. And then you still have a thing with a true actual opportunity for a true America First candidate. Did you see how small the turnout was for the TPUSA event? It was like a quarter full. Dude, it is bad, dude. What's this thing? Did you see how small the turnout was? Yeah, dude, it was bad. The whole thing is so bad. Was it for the Vance thing, right? Or was that for the one with Trump? Oh, the one with JD Vance. Dude, it was so bad. Didn't they rent like a whole arena? Didn't they rent a whole arena and only like, it's like the WWE stuff. Like when like they don't have enough to actually like fill out the stadium, they just put like where they are gonna have like the camera facing, and then like everything else is like empty around them. TPUSA is dead. Charlie Kirk seriously was a legend. Charlie Kirk was TPUSA, and that's not like an understatement. Do you think it should turn to a dictatorship to fix the problem? Dude, one of the things that you learn when you go through Rome and like what kind of happened with Rome is that you see like you had the Roman Empire actually legitimately had a dictator type position. It was actually an elected position. And they would take over 6 months, and 6 months increments was the term limit. Whenever like a crisis was facing, and when that crisis was resolved, then they would give back power. Trump is getting too cringe on Twitter. Trump is a weird old guy. Trump is cringe because, oh, dude, that New York Times article was devastating to Trump. It was devastating. It was devastating, man. Pretty much, Pete Hegseth was fucking rock hard for that war. The first term we had some pleasure. Dude, the first term was all snakes, bro. That first term wasn't even like I shouldn't have even counted. Dude, was it John Ratcliffe said that he didn't trust the Israelis, and then Marco Rubio just said it was bullshit. Susie Wiles didn't want to get involved with foreign affairs. What was it? The communications Asian dude said that it was gonna be tough to kind of go with the what was it? The framing or the rhetoric surrounding no new wars of the campaign. Who else was there? Oh, and then Kane was there, but he was a military guy, so he didn't really want to put too much in there. Base Crusader. Dude, Cat Turd, he gets like the 7,000 not from Israel but from like Trump. It's crazy. Dude, they got Benny, dude. They got Benny. They lost Benny. I didn't think that like that would happen, dude. They lost Benny Johnson. That was crazy. They actually lost Benny Johnson. Dude, he did that interview with JD Vance, and that was all GOP slop, bro. It was crazy. It was so bad, dude. They kind of lost Benny, though. They kind of lost Benny. Listen, they're all just talking about the bro had one good. It was more than one good post. I thought it was more than one good post. Anyway, Benny Johnson is a kind of Republican to harp on the was it the Save America Act? When the Save America Act is all political posturing, okay? Benny Johnson is not closeted. Dude, didn't he like allegedly have something to do with somebody young at CPAC? I feel like Milo kind of brought that out. When I saw Trump at Trump debate was when Catter. That's all I know. They were controlled. Yeah, I think didn't they have 2 debates? And I feel like the first one wasn't very good. I think that the second one was not that bad. He's deeply closeted. Yeah, he's just a weird guy. But yeah, anybody who like rags on the Save America Act is kind of they're dumb. And it should bother everyone in chat. They only did one. I thought that they why did I think they had 2? Why did I think that there was 2? I have no idea why I thought it was 2. Oh, that's right, because they did it. They did the one, and then Kamala wanted to do another one, but Trump said winners don't do 2. I think he said yeah. Yeah. Am I? I guess so. Yeah, I thought that Trump didn't do the best with, although he did. Trump kept Kamala from having a lot of good moments in there. Dude, Biden like short circuited Trump because Trump couldn't like play offense. That's the only reason why he won. Dude, Trump was talking about like golf handicaps with with Biden. That was crazy. Did you see that? Do you remember that? They're talking about like their golf swings. I don't know, Eddie. He beat Medicare. He beat Medicare to death. That was funny. I do remember that clip. That clip was funny. What was I saying before? Yeah, dude, the fact that it was General Trump. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, you know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking about the first Trump debate back in 2020, not the most recent one. The most recent one, Trump absolutely cooked Biden. Dude, he cooked Biden so bad in their one and only debate. That was crazy. That was nuts. Trump knew that all he had to do was June 24 to March 25 was peak MAGA. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. The fall over from the last year has been devastating. It's like watching your role model like fail. It's really tough to watch. It really is. I had never seen an administration like fundamentally fail its support like them. It's crazy, dude. I had never seen it before. I'd never seen before. They had the entire youth, they had Gen Z in the palm of their hand, and they lost it. They could have secured Gen Z for a generation. And here's the thing. Some people will say that, oh, you're being unrealistic with the mass deportations. We're not going to get rid of them all. That's not the point. The point isn't whether or not you're going to get every legal out. The point is trying in the first place. Not doing performative bullshit that is only meant to inflame. Because when you do that, we all know Biden was cooked. Biden's Twitter. That's funny. Biden's Twitter account, especially during debate. We know that you're not going to deport 20 million in 4 years. That's not the issue. The issue is trying in the first place. Because when you were doing the performative shit that they were doing in Minneapolis and Chicago and LA, dude, Biden 2028 might actually need to happen. I might agree with you there, Koba. You're putting these ICE agents in direct harm, is what you're doing. Because you're making them targets because of the performative nature of what you're doing, but you're not even actually doing the deportations to those levels. That's what sucks. So you have these edits, you have these videos of social media, these cut-ups, these montages with the cool music, with the cool art, the cool graphics, but you're not actually doing that. But you're advertising as if you are. So these agents are doing mild deportations, but they're getting heat like they're doing extreme ones. Pretty sure Mark Carney has deported more people in trouble at this point. Can you imagine, like, reading that sentence is crazy. Close to 1.2 million, please. Clinton got 12 million out. How is it not possible for us to get Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton got 20 million out? 12 million out? I don't know about that. I do know that a lot of people say that Obama deported a lot of people. Clinton had 8 years. I do know that Obama, like a lot of people compare Trump to Obama years. The problem with Obama is whenever they get encounters at the border and they would turn them away, they would label those as deportations. Wait, did you say 1.2 million or did you say 12? Yeah, they turn people at the border and they counted that. Oh my God, my water fell. Yeah, that's what the Obama administration did. So whenever you see those numbers about that, it's not really true. So don't really believe it. Good Obama both did passable jobs with the border, I mean. But now at the border, J.D. Vance kind of said that the administration's policy going forward was, as long, if you're here now, as long as we don't know that you're here, we can't deport you. So basically, it is a policy of only deporting the criminals, which, apart from the fact that every illegal immigrant is inherently a criminal, we're going to set that aside. They're saying that until you commit another crime at the border or within the country after you cross legally, then we deport you. Which is the biggest middle finger to the population you can have. Because now innocent Americans are sitting ducks for any deranged illegal who we should be going after already with all the heat in the world. Completely ridiculous. Imagine only getting deported at their established. It's crazy. From mass deportation to mass amnesty. Dude, the fact that Trump never, what was it called? The Dignity Act or something stupid. It was something retarded like that. The fact that Trump hasn't come out publicly against that bill is absolutely disgusting. He should sink her entire career. I think it's a congresswoman from Florida. Our budget is tens of trillions, but 10 billion for a wall is too much. No, it was unbelievable. And apparently they are promoting construction, but this administration likes to advertise the wrong stuff. I do not understand it for the life of me. I do not understand the life of me. Like, if they're actually doing stuff on the border on the wall, they should like show it around to their supporters. Instead, they want to do like AI slop videos. They want to do Trump as Jesus. They want to do all this kind of stuff. I don't understand it. Thoughts on Fishback beating Democrat, but not Byron? Was that in like a was that like a poll? Was that Fishback on Byron? Is that on is that a poll? I'm not familiar with that. Oh, are you saying like in a hypothetical one-on-one, Fishback beats the Democrat, but Byron loses to the Democrat? Talking about running. Okay, yeah. Yeah, probably. Listen, Byron, I don't think anybody really likes Byron. Byron is an established. Was it Byron Donalds and Apoc Shakur? those are like Trump level nicknames. Sent in TCR chat a few days ago. I didn't see that. I missed that. But Byron Donalds and Apoc Shakur is like a Trump A tier level, like S tier. That's an S tier name. Talking about random things distract us from the wall, the Epstein files, and the war in Iran. Yep. Dude, and whenever the Epstein files started to get a little too in the news, that we would, bro, we need Alan here. Whenever the Epstein files would get too big or too costly for the administration, then we would need like a foreign entanglement, right? We start bombing Iran. We start doing all this stuff. It's just distractions. Whenever Epstein stuff starts to come out, then Trump finds an excuse to like do Venezuela or something, or to do something in Iran. It's obvious what they're doing. They know what they're doing. This is a presidential administration. No, bro, I am a Democrat. That's literally what it is. Dude, Donald, fucking, Ron DeSantis said, dude, Ron DeSantis, who is seen like a god in Florida, has literally said in public to the media, first of all, he hasn't gotten the endorsement from Ron DeSantis, whose silence is deafening. Number two, he said that Byron Donalds spends more time in D.C. and that Ron couldn't name a single like legislative thing that Byron had done. That's it. I've always made it say this in low key. He is like he's Ben Shapiro. They shut down Congress for like 80 days. The dude, was that for like the TSA stuff for the DHS, and then like the House, the Senate passed something that didn't include any funding for ICE, and then the House was like, "What the fuck are you doing, guys? Like, fix this." DeSantis is not good, dude. DeSantis, EBT people were mad. The EBT people. DeSantis is not good. DeSantis didn't he pass like anti-Semitic legislation or something like that for the universities? That was kind of crazy, dude. Any governor doing anything like that is low key retarded. Like, I don't know like why you're doing that. That's a great way to like lose voters for no reason. Yeah. That's a great way to like lose voters for absolutely no reason. Yeah. No, DeSantis was good during COVID, but also so were a lot of other Republicans. DeSantis was like a leading guy though. Yeah, if you're not for his real issue. He just focuses too much on like the stupid Fox News social issues. Like I guarantee you, Ron DeSantis would run on no men and women sports. That's the problem with it. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-septic. That's what it is. Israel is indeed our greatest ally. Shapiro Levin 28 would be a winning ticket. I feel. You're gonna need to get Levin some like anti-Parkinson's medication though, because he shakes a lot. Dude, no, exclusively when they bash the head of a Jesus statue. That's when like they're the greatest ally. That's when they're that's what makes them the greatest ally. No, it's true. No, when they bash the head of a Jesus statue, that's how you know that that's the greatest ally. Fact check true. As a country that was founded by European Protestants, yeah. That's what it is. That's literally what it is. So, what else was hiding missiles in there? No, that's probably what it was. In the statue laid like AR-15s. That's why they had to get it. All right, guys, listen. I love to keep chatting here. However, I've been streaming for over 2 hours. This is by far the longest stream I've ever done. Had a lot of fun though. Got some cross platform fans, so that was really fun to watch. Moloch or Ball 28 or your choice, boys. If you did enjoy the content, if you liked the stream tonight, make sure to hit the like button. If you're on YouTube, subscribe as well. Obviously, if you are kind of live in the comments, I do appreciate the engagement. Going back and forth with you guys is one of my favorite parts to do with you guys, of course. So again, much appreciating to the chat, of course. If you are watching on Rumble, make sure to follow, subscribe, like the stream, comment below as well. If you're on X, follow me, like the stream, and repost. And if you are, of course, watching on YouTube, do subscribe, ring the bell, hit the like button, and comment. With that, I do appreciate you joining me here tonight. And I'm going to try my best to stream at least again sometime this week. It'll probably be on Thursday. If not, I may do one again tomorrow night. I'm not sure, but I do want to do another one later this week. But with that said, guys, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great night.